While Resident Evil 4 Remake rocked the world last year with its awesome retelling of the core campaign and Ada's Separate Ways storyline, there has always been speculation about where the next Resident Evil Remake may take us. Just recently, a Resident Evil fan noticed something in an older Resident Evil game's files on Steam that interestingly marks a new lead, as this same detail happened to the original Resident Evil 4 Steam files just moments before Resident Evil 4 Remake was officially announced to the public. We're about to dive into all that, but first, a moment to thank the sponsor of this video, World of Tanks. This large-scale free-to-play multiplayer cacophony of explosions and artillery might has been going strong since 2010, and the good folks over at Wargaming have a special surprise for those who have yet to channel their inner Chris Redfield manning the gun. You've got all kinds of tanks, over 800 in fact, ranging from large behemoths to small yet nimble powerhouses to maneuver over 40 diverse battle arenas. If you're up for a lot of tactical fun with some friends or just care to immerse yourself in the action, use the link in the description to download the game for free. And if you're a new player, even better. Use the invite code COMBAT to get for free 7 days of premium access, 250,000 credits, the Premium Tank Cromwell B, and 3 rental tanks for 10 battles each. Tiger 131, T78, and Type 64. If you're a returning player but haven't played World of Tanks in over 30 days, you'll get 3 days of premium access, the 2D style bargain camouflage, 7-day rental of Premium Tank Centurion Mk 5/1 RAAC, or 100k credit compensation if you already have this tank in your garage. Again, use the code COMBAT for all the goodies. Capcom has been firing on all cylinders with their Resident Evil remakes releasing one after the other, and it seems like the next one may already be getting loaded into the chamber as we speak. In a previous video, we discussed that there was a report stating that 5 Resident Evil projects were currently in development, including Resident Evil 9 and a variety of other projects, including a number of remakes. One of the remakes that was heavily speculated was Resident Evil 5, as that game was hinted at a number of times in the recent Resident Evil 4 remake, both in the main campaign and also in Ada Wong's campaign, Separate Ways. This new development on Resident Evil 5 Remake was brought to light over on Twitter by the name of this user who noticed interesting activity on Steam that indicates that a likely announcement of Resident Evil 5 Remake may be just around the corner. The activity uncovered is shown here, where these 3 items for Resident Evil 5, the release date, store description, and store name, were updated to have been removed. Now, these listings are still present on the Steam game page of Resident Evil 5, but this activity suggests that Steam is preparing to rename these files once Capcom unveils the remake of Resident Evil 5. More interestingly, this same thing actually happened to the original Resident Evil 4 game page months ahead of Resident Evil 4 Remake getting officially announced, so as you may expect, this has caused some fans to heavily speculate that Resident Evil 5 Remake may likely be the next Resident Evil game we may see remade next. Alright, so while we will just have to wait until Capcom officially announces their next remake, it is rather likely that the developers are indeed developing Resident Evil 5 Remake, even if this Steam file evidence turns out to be misleading. We will get into that real soon, but first, we gotta address all the recent happenings with Resident Evil and potential remakes. Back in early December of last year, we got wind over on 4chan, of all places, that a leak revealed that Capcom was developing a Code Veronica remake. The leak was pretty detailed, including entire areas and story set pieces from the early game, along with control schemes and more, so if you are interested in catching up on all the Code Veronica remake leaks and rumors, consider watching this video, linked in the description. Since the news of a potential Code Veronica remake, we have learned that a reputable Resident Evil leaker acknowledged that Capcom was developing 5 Resident Evil projects, with one of them being Resident Evil 9. I've been pretty outspoken that I would like to see at least a Code Veronica remake before we get an RE5 remake, mainly to set up Albert Wesker more in the remake timeline of the series, but I wouldn't be at all surprised if Capcom chose to go chronologically with RE5 being the next remake after RE4. 4. We all know that Resident Evil 5 will get a remake eventually. Heck, every game before Resident Evil 7 will likely be remade at some point. But there are numerous signs that hint at Resident Evil 5 being the next Resident Evil remake, and chief among them is how Resident Evil 4 Remake ended. With Albert Wesker being shown briefly in the final scene, what he's looking at on his monitor is perhaps the biggest hint of all. Wesker's screen contains numerous references to Resident Evil 5, with the lady on the left-hand side of the screen resembling most closely Excel Legione, a partner to Wesker in the events of the 5th game. Even more, at the center of the screen, we see the underground garden from the 5th chapter of Resident Evil 5, a key moment in all of Resident Evil lore, as that place is the birthplace of the progenitor virus. While this last scene from Resident Evil 4 Remake and the expanded Separate Ways DLC very much hint at a Resident Evil 5 Remake being the next game to receive a glow-up, we also got a hint earlier this year from the voice actor of Resident Evil 4 Remake's Albert Wesker himself, Craig Bernatowski. This hint comes from his response to the Game Awards posting on Twitter asking fans what their most anticipated game for PlayStation in 2024 is, with Bernatowski cryptically adding, "the one I'm working on," with a wink emoji. Bernatowski is best known as the actor for Albert Wesker in Resident Evil 4 Remake, but he has also worked on games including Assassin's Creed Valhalla, Watch Dogs Legion, and The Division 2, all of which are Ubisoft titles. While Bernatowski may be working on other games, it is certainly not a stretch to suppose that he is referring to a Resident Evil 5 remake, all things considered. This, coupled with the recent file activity over on Steam, make for a pretty solid case that Resident Evil 5 Remake may likely be the next Resident Evil remake we will get. As to what we will see in the Resident Evil 5 Remake, well, I wouldn't expect a dramatic departure from the core narrative of the original 2009 game. In line with the recent Resident Evil remakes, we are likely to see a reimagined take on the events of Resident Evil 5, with Wesker really starring here in full force. The recent Resident Evil remakes didn't completely rewrite the narrative of their original counterparts, so I would expect an RE5 remake to be, more or less, an experience more akin to what Resident Evil 4 Remake was to RE4. A game with more polished gameplay and reworked levels that kept fans of the original simultaneously aware of what's to come while also subverting their expectations at key moments, while also providing a modern playstyle and control setup for both veterans and newcomers alike. What made Resident Evil 5 so memorable for many was the co-op functionality in the campaign, and later on in the Mercenaries. And while I can't say that the Mercenaries will get this touch, I mean, I really hope it does, it would be a huge facepalm if Capcom decides to remove the co-op aspect of the campaign. Playing through the game in single player was not the intended way to experience the game. So for all you Resident Evil fans out there, do you think it would be wise of Capcom to keep the co-op functionality intact? That's a yes in my book. As for those playing the campaign in single player, a serious update to the AI-controlled partner would be essential. Resident Evil 5 also took the 4th game's shift to action to new extremes in Resident Evil 5, and I imagine much of that emphasis on action will be here in the remake. While the increased focus on action wasn't to many Resident Evil fans' liking, we can all agree that having the DLC from the main game included on day 1 would be awesome. The Lost in Nightmares DLC was, unsurprisingly, many fans' most fond moments with the game, so including this would be an incredible addition that could be further expanded on. Let me know in the comments what you'd like to see from a Resident Evil 5 remake below, as this game, while definitely pretty divisive among fans, is one of the most successful Resident Evil games ever made, and a remake of Resident Evil 5 just seems like a no-brainer for Capcom. That doesn't mean that other Resident Evil remakes may not happen, as older games like Code Veronica could very well see a remake later down the road. For more information on future Resident Evil remakes, check out this video. And again, be sure to download World of Tanks for some good high-octane action to get yourself in the Resident Evil 5 spirit, linked in the description. Thank you all for your continued support, and I will see you real soon in the next one.